Hello, my name is Zoe and I lead the City Mental Health Alliance Hong Kong. It's now the 23rd of March, and in Hong Kong, in response to COVID-19, schools, government offices and other public facilities, including clubs and leisure facilities, shut following the Chinese New Year holiday at the beginning of February. And many other offices moved to a work from home policy, and home learning was introduced for schools. In the last 3 weeks, some of these restrictions have been lifted and some people have returned to working in offices, some remain working at home and some are staggered. But in response to an increase in COVID-19 cases in the last few days, the decision has been made to ask civil servants to stay at home and an appeal for residents to reduce unnecessary going out. So in the last 8 weeks, many people have been working from home and they've adjusted their ways of working. So this video is part of a series put together by the City Mental Health Alliance, and we'd like to share a few of our learnings from Hong Kong with you. So I've been asked to answer 3 key questions. Firstly, what have been some of the key challenges that businesses have faced in looking after employees during the coronavirus outbreak? How have City Mental Health Alliance Hong Kong members responded, and maybe some examples of what's worked well? And what advice would we give to other organisations who are now starting a period of remote working? How can they support the mental health of their employees in these unusual working conditions? So the first question that's really arisen is really around where to get appropriate information, and the fact that there is now a plethora of information out there. One question we've been asked is, how do you deal with the infodemic? And where do you get those reputable and appropriate sources of information? And then after that, how do you ensure that that's communicated to employees in an appropriate manner? So in information terms, we need to use reputable, accurate and consistent sources, and that's presented from the company in a calm, appropriate and timely manner. We need clear messaging from the company that's apolitical and sticking to the facts. Emotional communications can create panic, perhaps scare people, but there's a role for the senior leaders here to be supportive, providing options of where to get support internally and externally, and contact points for teams so that people can reach out for support. In actual fact, when it comes to information, what we've now found is that there are so many sources of information. It's difficult for people to know what to choose. So when you have selected appropriate resources that you feel are reputable, consider using only a few to send messages out to staff to avoid overcomplicating the messages, and select ones that may also be particularly relevant for the area or region or group of people that you're speaking to. So when it comes to media, encouraging teams to communicate, check in with one another, but not overuse social media, and perhaps check in with the news once or twice a day and at set times to avoid information overload and reduce potential stress. Some companies have also recorded their own series of videos with external advisors. Some companies have used dial-in sessions with physicians. And if appropriate, maybe an idea would be to use other groups like employee resource groups to receive further feedback and ensure open channels of communication. So the second point is an obvious one, in that many people have been working from home remotely and potentially at short notice. And the media have called this the world's largest working from home experiment. And this is coupled with the fact that schools are shut, and so many people have been working from home with other family members, perhaps other relatives as well as children, and with many families having to juggle provision of home learning. And living accommodation in Hong Kong is often not that large with limited outside space. So a change in work patterns for everyone, with many other complications being laid on top. So what we've been hearing is that many organisations have had policies such as agile working in place and are now implementing these more systematically. Some of the working from home implementations include splitting offices into 2 teams so there are less people working, AB policy, and ensuring open discussions with line managers so that anyone who's nervous or perhaps more concerned, such as carers or new mums, can be catered for. And what we found is that now many people are physically located in one place and are remaining here for some time. But when this first broke in Hong Kong, many people went to different locations globally. So for example, I myself was working from London for a time, some of the team were here in Hong Kong, and another person was in Australia. So we found that it's important to know where people are physically located so that you're aware of their time zone, their working hours, what challenges they may be dealing with, as well as what support mechanisms may be available locally. It's really important to tailor the remote working for staff so that it suits the individual. Flexible working has to work for the individual and the company, and it needs to be a two-way conversation. So it's about recognising that everyone's situation is different. Some people prefer to be in the office due to space, good internet, or have family or children at home, but others perhaps don't want to travel or they need to work from home because of their children. The other thing is that we miss what are sometimes called those water cooler moments. So ensuring you have regular staff times to check in and regular communications with team meetings. And this is especially important when you have large numbers of people working from home. So there may need to be a different structure. Setting out clear expectations at the start in relation to things like working times, and that's both from an employee and an employer perspective, and encourage an open dialogue with different channels of communication, and that will vary for different people. The other thing we've heard is to ensure that technology and infrastructure is available if possible and provide workarounds for people that don't have it. So the ways that we communicate have changed and will continue to change. And so it's about ensuring that we can support staff not just now, but for the long term, and that everyone feels included and valued in the workplace and that they are supported. There may be concerns around recruitment and how we will recruit new staff during this time. And there could be changes to induction processes. And we've heard about the need to consider flexibility around those, such as doing this online or ensuring that people are still able to communicate, particularly those who perhaps don't have those structures around them in place. The other thing, we're not quite there yet, but we have tried this as a practice run, is around returning to the workplace and ensuring that people feel it's the right time for them and people feel safe. So things like sanitizer and face masks if possible, maybe also flexible working hours to support transport arrangements and so that people feel that they are returning to a safe environment. Another question that has been raised is around travel policies. And now this has changed many times in the last few weeks. So in the early days, some companies instigated no travel to specific countries or regions, and now that's clearly been extended. There are also policies around staff coming into the office if they or a member of their family has been travelling, and now the Hong Kong government has a mandatory 14-day period at home for anyone returning from overseas. So it's important that policies are communicated clearly, updated regularly, and that staff are aware of these updates. I believe the messaging is now very consistent from other sources, but it's really important to ensure that people take breaks, including regular lunch breaks, do some physical exercise, log off after the day is finished, and ensure that they are looking after themselves. There are examples from the region of innovations in ways of keeping physically healthy whilst inside a small working space, such as online exercise classes. Accommodation in Hong Kong is known for being relatively small, with a lack of space and often living with other family members, as I mentioned before. So things like maybe timing work breaks around others can be important. Keeping open communication with your family so that they know when, for example, someone wishes to use the table area or when someone will be taking a break, so perhaps you can time a work call around it. It's also been an extremely difficult time, and this is likely to continue for some time to come. And it's natural that people are feeling perhaps a rise in stress or anxiety. Reports here suggest that in Hong Kong, a large number of people, around 60%, maybe more, are struggling to sleep due to worries around COVID-19. And it's clearly likely that employees are experiencing these too. And it's important for us to be aware of this as individuals, line managers and employers, and put in place protective support mechanisms and respond early. So some of the things that we've been hearing are really important are being aware that this is a time of heightened awareness and possible anxiety. There are now many sources of information out there, but it comes back to the point around ensuring that information is used appropriately and provided from reputable resources and communicated clearly and effectively. In Hong Kong, we've also talked a lot about ensuring that people are able and know how to access their EAP or Employee Assistance Programme. That's been really important, that's been emphasised. Some members also have an on-site psychological support service that perhaps was in place before, and they're adapting their ways of working, including online or being able to structure some of those sessions for staff. I think it's also going to be helpful thinking about if you do have an EAP provider, perhaps there could be an increase in calls to the EAP provider, so making sure that there is provision for that. It's also important to be aware that there may be groups who are more vulnerable or perhaps need information presented in a different way. This is a changing environment, so it's important for people to know that they can get access to support and information where they need it. And it's also about knowing what to look out for with work colleagues It's harder to see if people's work patterns change and when they're not quite themselves because they are not in the office. So that's really important to keep up the communication, checking in, and so that people know where to go to for help and support. So really it's around ensuring that you've got all the tools ready to go before we even begin the working at home. That said, one thing that we have learned is that there are positives to this situation, and it can be really helpful for staff and others to identify these. So some of the positive things that we've really noticed here in Hong Kong. Historically, working from home is not something that's common, but this experiment has shown that it does work, people are productive, and we've been able to trial new ways of working and interacting. People are innovating on so many levels: online exercise, virtual dinner parties, virtual house parties, Zoom for learning with classmates. We've also noticed that many organisations are talking about mental health, and it's been seen as an opportunity to bring the conversation to the foreground, ensuring budgeting, and that we are building workplaces where people are able to thrive. And we've talked a little bit here about the existence of stigma on mental health as well, but with a view that this is a chance to talk more openly about mental health and its importance in the workplace and in supporting one another. I think we are seeing many more people checking in, and we're seeing this globally, and teams getting to know each other differently. I've lost count of the amount of times my children have said hi to people on conference calls, but it is a chance to get to know people outside of the office and bring your whole self to work. There is clearly a rise in community awareness and social conscience. And finally, also things like spending quality time with family. It is a hard juggle for many, but things like having family meals, playing games, and understanding what children are learning at school because you're going through that with them and helping them maybe even to deal with some of those anxieties they might be facing. These are all positives and lessons that we'll be taking into our future learning. So some brief lessons from Hong Kong, and no doubt there will be many more as we continue on this journey, and we'd love to learn from England too. Hope you all stay safe in the meantime. Thank you very much.